The NFL season kicks off in less than a week. For a lot of you, that means fantasy football. And you have until then, if you're a fantasy football fan, to draft your fantasy team. Fantasy football has been one of the most popular pastimes during the NFL season. An estimated 62.5 million people played during the 2022 season across the U.S. and Canada, according to the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association. But if you're like me and have never played fantasy football before, we have you covered. Dave Richard joins us now from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's a co-host of CBS Sports' award-winning show, Fantasy Football Today. So, Dave, help me out and anybody else out there who needs you to break down the basics of fantasy football. What's a typical draft look like?
Hey, Lana, you know, a typical fantasy football draft is building a team. You're going to pick players that you like, that you think are going to do well over the course of the football season. You're basically going to be your own version of Bill Belichick. And you go round by round. There's usually 8 to 12 people in a fantasy league. And you just take turns picking players. And the players that you like are the players that go on your team. And then you build a lineup that just works for you. And you start them each week. They're your football players for the season.
Okay. So that seems pretty easy. You draft your team. How do you score points and win your weekly matchups?
So that's an important detail to remember when you go back to your draft. It's knowing what the scoring system is. You know, in the NFL, a touchdown's worth 6 points. In fantasy football leagues, that's usually what they're worth as well. But you also get points for yardage. It's usually a point for every 10 yards rushing or receiving, a point for every 25 yards passing, 2-point conversion, that's worth 2 points. You turn the ball over, or if one of your players turns the ball over, that's worth -2 points. You don't want that on your fantasy team. But each week you'll play somebody else in your league, and whoever scores the most points wins. It's pretty simple, but you got to know your league rules before you go into your draft. In some leagues, catches are worth 1/4 of a point, 1/2 of a point, a full point. There are many, many mutations of fantasy football. It's changed a lot in the 20 years that we've been doing this here at CBS.
I have to say, the people I know that play fantasy football are all in. Do you have to be fully read in on the NFL, on every game to play fantasy football?
So it's just like anything else, Lana. If the more you put into it, the more effort you put in, the better you're going to do. And we've got an audience that sticks with us year round. It could be baseball season and people don't care. They want to work on their fantasy football teams. It's really become a national obsession because people love the NFL and it's a way for them to be closer to the NFL. Now, I've seen people win fantasy leagues. They barely set their own lineup and they still find a way to win because they just get lucky.
Yeah, Dave,
and that is certainly a part of the game.
Dave, that's me.
But the bottom line is that the more you know about the players and not just drafting players that you've heard of, but also players that maybe are recommended to you, the better that you'll do.
Okay, Dave, let's go to that. I want the cheat codes. If you're picking first, who are your top 5 players to draft? Who are some sleepers maybe to look out for? What can you tell me?
Yeah, sure. So the top 5 players in my rankings are Christian McCaffrey, running back of the San Francisco 49ers, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys, Tyreek Hill, a wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins, and then 2 more running backs, Breece Hall with the New York Jets, and Bijan Robinson, a second-year running back with the Atlanta Falcons. And these are all players that I expect to get huge numbers this year, double digits in touchdowns, lots of catches, lots of yards, the kind of thing that gives you fantasy points. But you asked for sleepers, and that's what everybody looks for. I like Josh Palmer, a wide receiver with the LA Chargers. I like Khalil Shakir, who's a wide receiver with the Buffalo Bills. A running back that I think can get you off to a good start is Chuba Hubbard with the Carolina Panthers. And then one other running back. This is the backup to Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco. His name is Jordan Mason. He's the one that would play if Christian McCaffrey were to miss time. That's somebody that I would like to have on my bench. Yeah, that's right. You've got a bench in fantasy football too. That's somebody that could end up being a factor if something were to ever happen to Christian McCaffrey.
Love that I got all those from you. Dave Richard from CBS Sports, thank you.
You got it.
And if you want the best fantasy football advice throughout this season, you can also subscribe to the Fantasy Football Today podcast on CBSSports.com or wherever you get your podcasts.